The cold winds of the North Atlantic, carrying salty moisture, lashed against the gray buildings of Naval Air Station Coronado, California. This is the cradle of the Navy SEALs, the place where the sons of the sea are forged into steel. On the edge of this world filled with testosterone, extreme challenges, and clandestine glory, a solitary figure slowly walked along the seaside path towards the base's mess hall. His name was Linus Lynn Croft. His gray hair was slightly disheveled by the sea wind, and deep wrinkles were etched on his bronze face, like rocks sculpted by time and the sea. He wore faded khaki trousers with a slightly loose collar, a similarly worn navy blue polo shirt, and well-worn brown work shoes. Compared to the young SEALs at the base, clad in uniform, brimming with energy and exuding a sharp, capable aura, he seemed like a ghost from a distant past. Only with careful observation could one discover a subtle connection between him and his surroundings, his slightly hunched, yet still bearing the upright posture of a soldier, and a small, extremely antique-style metal pin clipped above the collar of his polo shirt. It was a dark gold sea anchor, with an old-fashioned rifle and the classic trident crossed on it. Strangely, the right spike of the trident had been broken and meticulously repaired, leaving a subtle yet undeniable golden scar, like a lightning bolt. His rough right hand, covered in age spots and tiny scars, would unconsciously rise and gently caress the pin with his fingertips, as if touching a frozen moment in time, a wound that would never heal. He was one of the few veterans invited to visit the base. The ceremony and demonstrations were long over. The young elites flooded into the mess hall like a tide, replenishing their depleted energy. Linus deliberately lagged behind, needing some space to process the familiar sounds of training, the salty smell of the sea, and the dormant, decades-old beast of memories quietly stirred within him. The base's mess hall was spacious and bright, filled with the unique aroma of food, sweat, and disinfectant. The midday clamor was deafening, the clatter of plates, the rough laughter and shouts of the young team members, snippets of conversation about underwater demolition, nighttime parachuting, and close combat all intertwined into a vibrant symphony of energy and ambition. Linus silently took a simple sandwich and a glass of water, and like a shadow, slid unnoticed to the corner closest to the window, where the light was relatively dim, allowing him to avoid the crowd's gaze as much as possible. He sat down, gently placed his plate on the table, and gazed beyond the noisy crowd onto the boundless, turbulent Pacific Ocean outside the window. The gray-blue sea shimmered with fragmented silver light under the midday sun, the distant horizon blurry yet alluring. At that moment, the sharp glint in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, almost compassionate calm, like an old sailor gazing upon the ancient battlefield he had once conquered, only to ultimately choose to leave. He touched the broken trident again with his fingertips. A barely perceptible pain, mingled with immense longing, flickered across the deepest recesses of his eyes. However, the tranquility he craved did not last long. 3 SEAL rookies, fresh from their morning's brutal underwater endurance training, like 3 young bulls just freed from their restraints, soaking wet and radiating vibrant heat and boundless energy, carrying trays piled high with high-calorie food, chatted loudly and walked straight to the empty seat next to Linus. The leader, Jackson Miller, was muscular, his eyes burning with unwavering confidence, and an undisguised arrogance befitting a strong man. He was the best of this cohort, exceptionally talented, but also known for his fiery temper and haughty disdain. Miller slammed his plate on the table with a bang, slumped into his chair, and began loudly boasting to his companions about breaking his breath-holding record in the icy seawater. His gaze swept across the cafeteria like a searchlight, finally settling on Linus in the corner. The overly simple lunch, The incongruous silence and austerity, especially the old man's detached calm, all seemed like a silent provocation, pricking Miller's sensitive nerve yearning for attention and recognition. "Hey, look over there." Miller pointed at Linus with his fork, his voice undisguisedly mocking, loud enough for several tables nearby to hear. "An old gentleman from a tour group? Did you come to the wrong place? The main dishes here are probably much harder to eat than the fare at your senior center." His two companions laughed in unison, their eyes lingering on Linus's meager plate and his worn clothes. Linus slowly turned his head, his gray-blue eyes calmly meeting Miller's. His gaze was as deep as the sea after a storm, utterly undisturbed, devoid of even a trace of anger or displeasure. He merely nodded slightly, as if to acknowledge him, before turning his gaze back to the window. This complete silence and disregard was like a bucket of cold water poured over Miller's burning desire for recognition. He felt a humiliating sense of being slighted, and his face instantly darkened. "What? Are you hard of hearing? Or are you terrified of us real seals?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice, but the malice in his tone was even more intense, like sticky oil. "Listen, old man, look around. This is Coronado, the SEALs mess hall, not a place for you old fogies to take nostalgic photos in your worn-out clothes. Look at your clothes. And this." His gaze fell on the pin on Linus's chest, a mocking smile playing on his lips. "Which flea market did you pick up this junk from? This broken trident, is it a symbol of your failed life?" As he spoke, he actually reached out, wanting to touch the pin, wanting to defile the sacred symbol to Linus. Just as his fingertips were about to touch the metal surface, time seemed to be compressed, yet also infinitely stretched. Linus's right hand, which had seemed casually resting on the table, moved. Swift as a viper's flick, precise as a mechanical grappling move, with an explosive power and unwavering resolve far beyond his years, he forcefully parried Miller's wrist. The movement was small, yet swift and clean, carrying a defensive instinct honed through countless trials and tribulations, ingrained in his very bones. Miller froze, a sharp, tingling sensation shooting through his wrist, instantly snapping him back to reality. He stared incredulously at the seemingly frail old man before him. "Don't touch it." Linus's voice finally rang out, not loud, but like a deep-sea current, cold, heavy, and carrying an inviolable authority. These three words seemed not to emanate from his throat, but from the depths of his chest, resonating from behind the broken trident. "You fucking ... double quotes after a brief moment of shock. The rage of being publicly refuted exploded within Miller like a petrol bomb. He abruptly stood up, the chair legs scraping the smooth floor with an ear-piercing noise, instantly drawing the attention of most of the people in the cafeteria. "You dare lay a hand on me? You old piece of trash who snuck in from who knows where." He completely dropped his pretense, pointing at Linus's nose, his voice distorted and shrill with extreme rage, a blaring, insulting roar. "Who do you think you are? Wearing a broken safety pin and trying to play the hero here? Believe me, I'll throw you and your ragged clothes into the Pacific Ocean to feed the fish right now." The clamor in the mess hall seemed to be abruptly cut off, instantly plunging into an eerie silence. All eyes were focused on the suddenly formed eye of the storm. Knives and forks froze in mid-air. Conversation abruptly halted. Several base sergeants also noticed the tense atmosphere. A Sergeant Major Davis, an experienced, resolute veteran, immediately frowned and strode over. "Miller." Sergeant Major Davis's voice was stern, trying to control the situation. "Sit down immediately. Keep quiet. This is a guest of the base." He recognized Miller and his group of problem cadets, and knew they could sometimes cause trouble. But Miller, blinded by anger and shame, wouldn't listen to any advice. A guest. Sergeant, you saw him strike first. What kind of guest is he? A freeloader, an old conman. He persisted, his spittle almost landing on Linus's face. Sergeant Davis turned his gaze to the ever-silent Linus. The old man remained seated, back straight, hands resting calmly on his lap. Only the broken trident pin reflected a faint, stubborn light in the light streaming in from the window. Davis's gaze was fixed on the pin, his heart leaping. A vague, almost forgotten fragment of memory, like a bubble in deep water, struggled to surface. It seemed to be a fleeting glimpse of a pattern he'd seen in a corner of a pile of black and white photographs and yellowed files during a highly confidential internal training lecture. A broken trident. A chill ran down Davis's spine. He wasn't sure, but a shrewd intuition honed through years of military service a knack for danger and the unusual told him that beneath the old man's calm lay an extraordinary undercurrent. Things were far more complicated than Miller, that fool, had made them out to be. He didn't try to argue with the irrational Miller. Instead, he immediately stepped back, turned his back, and used his encrypted walkie-talkie to contact the base command center at top speed. Command center, this is Sergeant Major Davis from the mess hall, number 741. A serious verbal and potential physical altercation has occurred, here involving an invited veteran named Linus Croft. Key information. He's wearing a very distinctive identification pin, dark gold with a C anchor base, crossed rifle and trident. Repeat, the right spike of the trident was broken and repaired. Requesting identification and urgent instructions. A brief, suffocating silence fell on the other end of the walkie-talkie, as if the signal had traversed a vast expanse of time. A few seconds later, a voice rang out, filled with disbelief and shock, even tinged with barely perceptible fear. Sergeant Davis! Confirm information. Stand by. Ensure Mr. Croft's absolute safety. No further harassment. Repeat. Ensure his safety. The commander is on his way to the mess hall. Immediately. Davis put down the walkie-talkie, his palms already drenched in sweat. He turned to look at Miller, still shouting, and Linus, sitting as still as a mountain, his emotions a complex mix. Less than 3 minutes, which felt like an eternity, came from the mess hall entrance, with a series of rapid, heavy footsteps carrying an undeniable air of authority. All the SEALs eating, including the still chattering Miller, instinctively looked over, then froze, as if struck by a spell. The base's highest-ranking commander, Rear Admiral Marcus Thorpe, and the commander of SEAL Team 3, Captain James "Old Man" Walsh, both with grim faces and eyes like volcanoes about to erupt, strode in. Rear Admiral Thorpe wasn't even wearing his service jacket, just a crisp white shirt, his tie slightly askew, showing how rushed and urgent his arrival was. Behind them followed several senior staff officers, their expressions stern and their presence imposing. The air in the entire mess hall seemed to be sucked out instantly. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone instinctively stood up, and tables and chairs rattled haphazardly. Rear Admiral Thorpe and Captain Walsh's gazes, like precision-guided missiles, instantly pierced through the crowd, locking onto Linus Croft in the corner, and the broken trident pin on his chest, which gleamed with a unique stubborn light under the mess hall lights. 2 high-ranking officers, holding supreme authority in the Navy, walked straight to Linus without hesitation or exchange. Under the horrified, almost breathless gaze of the entire crew, Rear Admiral Thorpe and Captain Walsh simultaneously sprang to attention, their mountain-like bodies leaning slightly forward, raising their right hands to give the elderly man in the old polo shirt, seated in a chair, a perfectly precise, incredibly slow salute, imbued with utmost respect, excitement, and even a hint of remorse. Sir! Rear Admiral Thorpe's voice boomed, yet trembled uncontrollably with excitement, echoing clearly in the deathly silent mess hall. Poseidon! Commander Linus Croft! It really is you. We thought, Poseidon. This cry, like an ancient whale song from the deep sea, like a lightning bolt cleaving through the mists of history, stirred up a tidal wave in the hearts of every SEAL who had heard of that legendary name. This is the name that exists only in top-level internal teaching materials, in anecdotes passed down orally, and at the very top of the military's spiritual lineage. The name revered as one of the founders of many cornerstone theories of modern Navy SEALs, underwater warfare, and extreme environment adaptation training. Colonel Walsh, this tough guy known for his ruthless and demanding nature, affectionately called Dad by his team members, now had his weathered face contorted with visceral muscle contractions, and his eyes uncontrollably reddened and moistened. He stepped forward, his gaze like a red-hot iron, sweeping over everyone in the room, who stood frozen in shock, especially the ashen-faced Jackson Miller. His voice was unusually hoarse and heavy from the effort to suppress his emotions, each word like a hammer blow to their hearts. You bunch of ... ignorant, arrogant fools. Do you know who's sitting in front of you? Huh? He pointed at Linus, his finger trembling slightly with excitement. Look closely. This is Linus Poseidon Croft, not sir. He's Commander. Croft. He's a living fossil of the Underwater Demolition Team, UDT, the predecessor to the Navy SEALs. One of the earliest tactical advisors recruited during the early days of SEAL Team 6, Dev Grew. A ghost who carried out dozens of top-secret MACVSOG missions during the Vietnam War. His gaze suddenly fixed on the pin on Linus's chest, his voice rising abruptly, filled with immense sorrow and almost pious respect. You weren't laughing at this pin? Aren't you laughing at this broken trident? I tell you, this isn't broken. This is an indelible medal. It's from 1972, in the deadly waters of the Mekong Delta, during a night raid on a critical supply line, Commander Croft, to cover the retreat of his severely wounded and immobile teammates, under enemy fire, single-handedly installed and manually detonated it. An explosive charge powerful enough to destroy the entire bridge. In the instant of the explosion, a scorching fragment of steel beam, blown away, pierced his chest like the Grim Reaper's scythe. It was the trident pin he always wore that shielded him from this fatal blow. The pin broke, but it saved his heart. With the broken trident in his hand, and the excruciating pain of his chest being burned by the shards, he dragged his nearly unconscious comrade, pursuing the enemy, swimming over 5 kilometers in the icy river until they rejoined the support troops. This pin, specially approved by the Secretary of the Navy, was restored to its original condition by the most skilled craftsmen, as a permanent testament to his fearless courage, self-sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to his comrades. It is heavier and more glorious than any of the gleaming badges on your chests. The blood and fire stained on it are unimaginable to you rookies. Major General Thorpe continued, his gaze as icy as a Siberian chill, instantly freezing the last vestige of hope in Jackson Miller. And you, Cadet Miller. His voice crashed down like hailstones. How dare you use your filthy tongue and foolish fingers to insult this living legend? Call him old trash? Mock the symbols of honor he earned with his blood and life. You insulted not only Commander Croft personally, you insulted the history of the SEALs, the soul of this team, the foundation forged by the sacrifices of all your predecessors. Jackson Miller's psychological defenses shattered completely under this barrage of blows. A massive, overwhelming wave of shame, mixed with deep-seated fear and unbelievable shock, utterly overwhelmed him. He looked at the old man he had so humiliated and disregarded just minutes before. Now, under the respectful salutes and emotionally charged narration of the two generals. His figure seemed to grow immensely tall, as if he had become the base, the ocean itself a sacred mountain he could never reach, only look up to. His legs buckled, almost unable to stand, and he stumbled to the table, tears, snot, and sweat mingling together, utterly disheveled, crying out incoherently, his voice hoarse and broken. Commander Croft, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm an idiot. I'm a blind bastard. I know nothing. Please, forgive me. I'm really sorry. He sobbed uncontrollably, the immense regret almost tearing him apart. Linus Croft slowly, seemingly with some difficulty, stood up. The weight of years and the lingering pain of old wounds seemed exceptionally clear at this moment. He remained silent, only raising his right hand in a crisp, steady military salute, the movement carrying the detachment of someone who had weathered countless life and death experiences and seen through the vicissitudes of life. Then, his deep, ocean-like gray-blue eyes fell upon Miller, who lay collapsed on the ground, weeping uncontrollably. In his eyes, there was not a trace of Victor's triumph, nor the anger of the offended, only a profound, vast, Pacific-like tolerance, a barely perceptible understanding of youthful recklessness, and a deep-seated weariness. He reached out, not to accept the cheap apology, but across the table, gently yet with a firm strength, patted Miller's trembling shoulder, soaked with sweat and tears. "Son," his voice was still hoarse, yet it seemed to contain the depth and tranquility of the ocean itself, clearly reaching Miller's ears, and the ears of every breath-holding team member. "The honor of the SEALs is never about bullying the weak or flaunting strength. It lies in silent protection, in ultimate sacrifice, in the unwavering commitment to your comrades. Remember this. It's more important than how long you can hold your breath or how fast you can run." Having said that, he looked away from everyone else, nodding slightly to Major General Thorpe and Colonel Walsh, whose eyes were filled with tears. His gaze seemed to say, "It's all over." Then he picked up the almost untouched sandwich and water glass, turned around, and slowly walked towards the mess hall exit. His steps were still somewhat slow, even carrying a hint of the unsteadiness characteristic of the elderly, but each step was exceptionally steady, as if treading on an invisible path paved by time and faith. The broken and repaired trident pin on his worn navy blue polo shirt swayed slightly with his steps, gleaming in the pale light of the mess hall with a restrained, ancient light, a light far more brilliant, more profound, and more poignant than any metal. That light spoke of silent sacrifice, unspoken glory, and the eternal echo left behind after an era had passed. After he left, a long, suffocating silence remained in the mess hall. Jackson Miller slumped onto the cold floor, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving violently as he let out suppressed, desperate sobs. All the SEALs present, regardless of rank, experienced an unprecedented spiritual storm and baptism. For the first time, they truly realized that true legends often walk among the masses in the simplest of garments. True strength is not a flamboyant roar, but unfathomable accumulation and silent responsibility. Poseidon may have long since retired, and his figure has aged, but his spirit, like that broken and repaired trident, is forever engraved in the blood of this team, becoming an inextinguishable lighthouse, guiding those who come after him through darkness and turbulent waves.